Well, Jack Benjamin is a New Orleans-based play-by-play man, a jack of all trades, if you will, has covered all kinds of different things for ESPN, NBC, Olympics, college basketball, you name it. But, the topic du jour, Jack, as I'm sure you know, is college basketball in the Sweet 16. And what a setting for you to be based in New Orleans. How rich is the tradition, the college basketball tradition, where you're located?
Yeah, first off, Carolyn, I appreciate you having me on. Yeah, it's very rich. It's a lot of fun. I can tell you the buzz here is huge in the Big Easy. People have been talking about this for the last couple of years, just kind of working towards hosting a Final Four here for the sixth time. And, I was joking with you earlier, but you look at the history of having the Final Four here. Obviously, they call it March Madness. Madness is going to ensue in some form in this Final Four. You just look at the history. The first time they had it here was Michael Jordan hitting the shot for North Carolina against Georgetown, obviously. Keith Smart for Indiana in 87. You can just go. The Chris Webber timeout was here in New Orleans. People probably remember the Michigan Fab Five in 93 when they lost to North Carolina. The last time it was here, Kentucky won in 2012. I thought Kentucky had a pretty good shot to return and play in the Final Four here. And, of course, St. Peter's had other ideas. So it's been a lot of fun being in this area, talking to people about the excitement level. And, Caesars Superdome is going to be on fire in a couple weeks' time.
Yeah, there's something about that area and some other locations around the country that is just tailor-made, I feel like, to host this tournament and everything that comes with it. And you noted the history so beautifully. But because you mentioned Kentucky, let's start with St. Peter's. I mean, the entire nation, maybe with the exception of those who live in that great state, have really thrown their momentum behind what was defined early as this year's Cinderella. Now they run into a Purdue team that is talented and is going to be really tough for them on Friday. Do you think that they have a chance of continuing this momentum and advancing?
Have a chance? Yes. Can they? That's kind of the question of if they can do it. I do want to say I'm a native New Yorker, grew up about 50 miles northeast of St. Peter's. So this is really cool for me. I've known the school for a little while. Have I followed it super closely? No, I'd be lying if I said that. But really amazing what they're doing. Obviously beating Kentucky, and everybody knows that the upset of monumental proportions that was. When you look at Purdue in the matchup here, first off, everybody knows no Cinderella, in a sense, who's been a 15 to get to the Sweet 16 has ever won a game in that regional. So you go back to Florida Gulf Coast, couldn't get it done against Florida. Obviously, last year, Oral Roberts made a run, but that was in a bubble in Indianapolis. So can this happen? Of course. I look at what they've done so far in the tournament. You have some evidence, is the good news if you're a St. Peter's fan or someone trying to hold on to hope that they can continue this run. In the first round, they face an incredible big guy in Oscar Tshiebwe, one of the best in the country. He's going to be Player of the Year candidate. He goes for 30 and 16, and they still win that game against Kentucky. Purdue has a couple of monsters. It's basically a dual-headed monster in the front court of Zach Edey, who is 7'4". I'm not exaggerating. He's literally 7'4", 300 pounds, and made out of a lab, if you will. And then they have another guy in Trevion Williams, who's about 6'10", 260. So the front court is the biggest issue. St. Peter's, as everybody knows, they play four guards. Casey Ndefo is the three-time reigning MAC Defensive Player of the Year. He's an unbelievable shot blocker. You think about a guy who's only 6'7". He's blocked, I think, like 300 shots in his career. He's the active shot block leader in the NCAA. So in order for them to win this game, they have to contain the front court somehow. Now, how are they going to do that? I don't necessarily know. Getting lucky and being able to obviously make shots from the perimeter will help. But being able to contain those two big guys is the biggest key. I look at teams that are higher seeds over the years. All of them have usually had very good depth. St. Peter's is not historically deep, which kind of makes this unique in terms of what they're doing. But what Purdue has done in the tournament, if you look at what they did to Texas, Texas has a bunch of big guys. They have depth in the front court. They got them in foul trouble immediately. I think they're plus 50 or maybe plus 45 right now in free throw attempts in their first couple games of the tournament. So but when you're out shooting people at the free throw line, you're getting them in incredible foul trouble. It makes things very difficult. So I see that as kind of a key that they'll have to do. I don't love their chances to contain that front court. So then you move to the back court and you look at, okay, well, in the tournament so far, what evidence do you have? Their defense has been great. They haven't faced someone like Jaden Ivey yet, who people now know he's a household name. He's going to be a lottery pick for Purdue. He's averaging 20 in the tournament. Can they contain him? That's going to be a question mark. I see this as a game where St. Peter's probably has to make in the range of 10 to 12 3-pointers in order to have a chance. They only made 3 threes. People probably thought, they look at their first 2 games, they've shot the lights out. They really haven't. They made 9 threes against Kentucky. They made 3 threes against Murray State. they're an unbelievably good defensive team. I think that's what Shaheen Holloway has done really over the course of his 3 years. They've been really good leading up to this point, but they're top 30 nationally in adjusted defensive efficiency. So that's really where they've hung their hat in this tournament rather than just shooting the lights out. I think this is a game, though, where they're going to have to score and really shoot the ball well from the perimeter.
How familiar were you with Shaheen Holloway? You mentioned your background being, a New York guy. Is this a program that for people who really care deeply, are super plugged into college basketball and don't just kind of dip in March when the tournament comes around? Is this a program that has been on the radar for a little while, or for what Shaheen Holloway has done for a little while? Or is this truly a surprise to kind of see him take this really tough group and have them make it this far?
Yeah, I've known his name for a couple of years. I did know a little bit about the player he was and kind of the career he had at Seton Hall. But as far as did you see this coming? No, I didn't see them making a Sweet 16 run, knocking off Kentucky necessarily. The one thing I will say, if you look at kind of their trajectory since he took over in 2019, first off, he inherited a team. If you just look into the story of St. Peter's, it's hard to believe because the facilities were just a disaster. There was flooding in the office every single day. They basically, there's stories about how they couldn't necessarily play music during practice because the practice gym was attached to where the musical that the band and different people were practicing during the day. So all those things are true when he took over. They've made significant facility upgrades. They've renovated the gymnasium, which has been huge. 2019, he took over a team that was in a really bad spot. He struggled his first year. There's a lot of articles about that first year and just how frustrated he was and how, he put all the onus on himself. He always took responsibility. 2020, though, he flipped the thing around immediately. They were, obviously, COVID shut everything down. They were in a really good spot, I think, in entering that MAC tournament in 2020. And obviously, they didn't have a chance to do that, but they finished in the top 3 in the MAC over the course of the last 3 years. So this is not a overnight boom. Oh, they're in the Sweet 16. They're making a miracle run. This is a 2-3 year development. I think that's the thing a lot of people miss with a lot of these mid-majors. Florida Gulf Coast the same way. They kind of had that trajectory upward. Oral Roberts. You can look back to a couple schools that sort of have followed that path. But this has been a 2-3 year process in the making. And you look at Shaheen Holloway and what he did in recruiting. I always think okay, well, how did you build your roster? He has taken you mentioned I'm from New York. He's taken guys local to that area, 6 or 7 players. Everybody knows Doug Eddard, the mustached wonder. It reminds me of Goose from Top Gun with what he's got going on there. And I know he just signed an NIL deal with Buffalo Wild Wings, but he's a local kid. Matthew Lee, their point guard, is a local kid. They've got so many guys. Daryl Banks is a New Jersey kid as well. Their leading scorer who had 27 against Kentucky. So he finally got his guys in the program. They've all bought in. One of my favorite articles about him, that first year in 2019, nobody averaged more than 8.5 points per game. Nobody averaged more than 20 minutes. He just wanted everybody to play together, get on the court. He played 12 or 13 guys. So he's built this system. He's gotten his personnel in place. And this has been a 2 or 3 year process now in the making, obviously capping it off with a Sweet 16 run and hoping to go further.
I love that part of it, that they're playing Jersey basketball, I guess, if you will, which if you're from this area, from New York and New Jersey, that, there's something different about the edge that comes with that. I mean, for you, growing up in this area, does that something that resonates with you? I mean, that the Jersey kids on this roster representing a small school of 2,300 kids total and putting them on the national map, that there's something just different about it. And, just watching how the media has intensified over the last couple of weeks. I mean, now just cameras everywhere descending on them in Philly and going to Run Baby Run Arena. And you see the likes of, some of the most preeminent sports writers in the country making their way to that gym in Jersey City. But, there's a grittiness, a sort of toughness, a Jersey basketball quality to this that I think gives people even more reason to, like you mentioned, I mean, you're spot on, to root for this group.
Yeah, you would have thought watching their practice and watching them leave for Philadelphia the other day that they were a bunch of movie stars with how much media was there. That was unbelievable to see. I was thinking of going down there myself to checking it out with what was going on. No, they flooded to that area because of what's going on. It's obviously captivated America. I think you make a great point. Yeah, there's something to be said about the pride of that area. New York, New Jersey. Obviously, it's a Jersey City school, so New Jersey more specifically. But yeah, I think these are guys. You look at them taking a shot on a program that they didn't necessarily have to. It was obviously not in a great spot when they first came in, and Shaheen's talked a lot about having to really sell these guys on his vision and the type of player he was back in the day at Seton Hall and why they can get to the levels they can. I think that's absolutely a huge part of it. I think there's a ton of pride for these guys in representing and doing this for New Jersey. This is the first time. I mean, as many stories that are incredible about this, and the most amazing one is the fact that the last time a New Jersey school made the Sweet 16, Shaheen Holloway was the point guard of Seton Hall. It doesn't get any more full circle than that. So, yeah, I think it's a huge piece to have all these kids from that area doing this and putting this little school that's 3,500 undergrads on the map. And I can guarantee you it won't be 3,500 for very long, because enrollment is about to rise pretty fast.
Yeah, there was something anecdotal in the New York Times about how the bookstore has sold like $4,000 worth of t-shirts and sweatshirts and all this stuff. And I think they asked whoever runs point, at the school library or the gift shop, and they said, yeah, that's more than we normally sell. I mean, that America just loves an underdog in this tournament. And, not to get too existential about it, but I sometimes wonder why that is. I mean, you have these great sort of marquee programs that have rabid fan bases. And I want to ask you about Coach K and Duke too, but then every March when you have these mid-majors or a team that goes on a run, America just goes full throttle behind them. And I wonder what it is about them that appeals to us so much. As a play-by-play guy, I mean, do you kind of have a feel for why we love these Cinderellas so much?
I just think it's the storyline. I think everybody loves a great story. I think people can relate more to the guy who is, Doug Edert and is 6 foot or 6'1" and under recruited and is, obviously has that, showcasing that mustache and now signing the NIL Buffalo Wild Wings deal, and, under recruited guys and people who have been underdogs their whole life, and a coach who talks the way Shaheen Holloway does about, hey, we're from New Jersey and New York. We're not getting scared of anybody. It's just something that you can get behind versus, yeah, we're not all 6'8" and can jump out of the gym and can dunk on everybody. And we're not all McDonald's All-Americans. We don't all kind of come from sort of that background and are one and dones going straight to the NBA. So I just think that's the great part about college athletics. And I think the other part is, because it's the unique aspect, the best part about the NCAA tournament, it's one day, it's one game, it's that 2-hour window. These guys don't have to beat Purdue 4 out of 7 in the NBA finals. This is one game. You got to beat them for 40 minutes. Obviously, you could go to overtime and maybe a little bit more, but I think that's what makes it a little bit easier. You only have to root for them for that, that one game, and don't worry about the whole season necessarily. But I just think the stories are what capture us, and kind of where people come from, and we put it into perspective with our own background. And yeah, I think as a play-by-play guy, I'm always looking to find that story. And okay, so why is this guy doing what he can, and how have these underdogs been able to get to where they've gotten to? Yeah, I think it's just something that is incredibly easy for all of us to get behind and root for.
In my opinion, this is really NIL, name, image, likeness at its best. When there was a lot of talk about, oh, well, like the big superstars are going to get more and how's this going to work and dividing up the money and all that stuff. I mean, it's been such a controversial subject. But for me, it's guys like him who can do a smaller deal with the Buffalo Wild Wings and capitalize on a unique moment in time. And, I know we got to move on because we got other teams to talk about in the tournament. But I just, Holloway's done such a phenomenal job. And it's kind of sad for me that the conversation so quickly with him turns to, well, what's his next move? Is he going back to Seton Hall? What does his future hold? I mean, that is a huge part of this. Huge credit for him for, like you say, taking a program that was in something of shambles in 2019 and building it up to where they are now. But, I would guess that you would feel the same way. I mean, when you do something like that, you earn your next opportunity. And I just wonder, if anybody has a feel right now for what his future might hold, if you see him kind of moving on. I mean, I guess time will tell, and they have to take care of business here first. But it sounds like he's on the brink of potentially making a pretty big move.
Yeah, it's been widely reported. I know Jeff Goodman is someone I follow closely. He's a really good insider for Stadium and a bunch of college basketball networks. He's reported that when the season ends, Shaheen Holloway will be going to Seton Hall. Now, until it's confirmed, I'm not going to say it's actually happening, but that's the logical move. Kevin Willard has obviously moved on to Maryland, their former coach. So it's the obvious move in place. It is unfortunate that the conversation so quickly shifts to what the next job is going to be. And it was the same thing. I remember back when Florida Gulf Coast was making their run, the questions in the Sweet 16 for Andy Enfield were, okay, well, where are you headed next? And where is he going to go? And where is he going to end up? And it's unfortunate that the conversation so quickly turns to that. It happens for a lot of guys. You think about a lot of youth prodigies in different sports, and we wonder how quickly can they rise to professional ranks and stuff. It's similar for coaches, unfortunately. I just think this guy has such a bright future. His head is on so right. He's built the program the right way. Obviously, he's taken guys who are not 4 or 5 stars and has turned them into a really good and cohesive unit. And defensively, he's just made them such an incredible group, the way that they can guard and pressure and how hard they play. I just think when you have a coach who can just galvanize a group the way that Shaheen Holloway has been able to do with this team, and a lot of young guys and then older guys he's brought in, and obviously his first recruiting class. We've talked about guys like Doug Eddard and Matthew Lee and Defo and all of these guys, Daryl Banks. Yeah, that's a guy who has an incredibly bright future and someone who loves his roots. Seton Hall is obviously where he started off and kind of where he pushed himself to. And unfortunately, he got injured in that NCAA tournament, and it's kind of full circle for him to end up there. But regardless of what happens, he's left this program in an incredible spot. The future is so bright at St. Peter's, and obviously wishing him the best for where he's going to end up.
Yeah, likewise. He has done a phenomenal job. Hopefully they can get hot from the perimeter. I would love to see them do something that we don't often see a 15 seed do. Okay, so let's move on to some of the more perennial powerhouses. You look at Gonzaga, you look at Kansas. As you kind of assess the top seeds that are remaining in the Sweet 16, which teams do you think, when you look at the matchups, look pretty vulnerable?
Yeah, I think there's vulnerability with all of them. This is, in my opinion, this is the most wide open that this tournament has been in quite a while. Just across the board, the way that college basketball, the landscape has shifted, the transfer portal, the COVID seniors, all these players who are back. You got these older guys. So I knew going in it was going to be a chaotic tournament. I didn't have a lot of faith in anybody, honestly. But yeah, in terms of vulnerability, if I could rank the 3-1 seeds remaining, I would say the most vulnerable right now is Arizona. And the NCAA tournament for me is all about matchups. I happen to know Houston very well. I cover Tulane on a regular basis. I know the American Athletic Conference very well. Houston is unbelievable. Kelvin Sampson, I don't know how many people are familiar with his story and the way that he's built up Houston, but they won 14 games in his first year. They've won 20 plus every year since. They've won the second most games, only to Gonzaga, over that span. They lost their best 2 players about maybe 3 or 4 weeks into the season, Marcus Sasser and Tremont Mark. And all they've done is win since. It's incredible what they've done. Most teams, you lose your arguably your 2 best players, I should say. I'd say Tremont Mark's like the 3rd or 4th best player maybe. But most teams lose their first 2, but their top 2 players, they're done. And these guys have just changed around the way they play. They've gone inside more instead of being perimeter oriented. I think Arizona's got a lot of issues right now. It starts with Kirk Kriisa, their point guard. He has not been healthy. He's battling a couple of injuries. Shot the ball horribly against TCU. He nearly shot them. I mean, he literally couldn't hit water if he fell off a boat in that game. He just kept launching threes and kept missing. And at some point, you're thinking like, "Hey, man, maybe don't shoot that one." But that's been a big issue for them. And I also wonder, at some point, like Tommy Lloyd has done an incredible job in his first year at Arizona. The last time a first-year coach won an NCAA championship was all the way back in 1997 when Arizona did it the last time. I wonder how the pressure maybe gets to him down the stretch. They were really lucky to get by TCU. There were a couple of questionable calls down the stretch. They pulled it out. Ben Matherin's as good a player as there is in college basketball. He may very well end up being the most outstanding player in this tournament with the way he's played. But I love Houston and the way they defend. I think this game is going to be close. I think it's going to be very physical. And I do wonder if it is close in crunch time and depending on foul trouble and things like that, can Arizona get it done? So I'd say they're the most vulnerable, but Kansas has a tough matchup with Providence. I'm a big fan of Providence. Ed Cooley just continues to drink the Kool-Aid of, hey, we're lucky. Just keep calling us lucky. All they've done is go 11-2 in games in close games this year, in games decided by 5 points or less. They just find a way to win down the stretch in close games. Al Durham and Jared Bynum are great players. The question is if they can slow down Ochai Agbaji and that Kansas backcourt. So that'll be interesting. And then I think Gonzaga's got a tough draw, not only with Arkansas, but I think they have the toughest 3 teams in their region left. That's the only region basically that went chalk, the top 4 seeds being in Duke and Texas Tech on the bottom part of the bracket. Obviously, we'll talk about Coach K here in a little bit, but Gonzaga is not going to have an easy road to get to the Final Four. Arkansas is very tough defensively. I don't know if they can score enough to keep up with Gonzaga. I think it's more likely that Gonzaga would lose in the Elite Eight than it is in the Sweet 16, but that's kind of how I would rank, I guess, the 1 seeds on a vulnerability scale.
So, you look at what Coach K and Duke has done to get to this point. They've got a very difficult opponent in Texas Tech in the Sweet 16. Do you think that Coach K's retirement starts tonight, or do they have a little bit more in them?
It very well could. This is a tough matchup. Obviously, Duke got by Michigan State. That was not easy. They were down late. They had to rally. But you heard the emotions of Coach K with Tracy Wolfson after the game, and he kind of knows it was pretty dicey there at the end. They rallied. I was impressed with that, with a young group. You think about like Coach K. I'll say this before I get into the Texas Tech matchup: the way that he's kind of rebuilt himself and been able to win in different eras has been incredible. The one and dones. He's done it with 4-year guys. He's done it when he's had guys that are there for 2 or 3 with a mix of one and done. So he's now got a really young group. He has a couple of guys who've been there for 2 or 3 years, but boy, they had to rally in a big way to beat Michigan State. I wonder in this game about Texas Tech's defense and offensively how disciplined can Duke be. They don't play it, so it's well known. Duke does not play a motion type, move the ball, pretty passing, what you'll see out of a team like Gonzaga, the way they can move at Arizona, the way they can pass the ball. Duke's a lot of ISO ball. Paolo Banchero's one of the best players in the country. He's going to be a lottery pick in the draft. He's kind of your go-to guy, but he's an ISO ball type player. Wendell Moore is a similar way. Mark Williams is a guy you can kind of feed the ball down to in the post. But Texas Tech mucks a lot of things up. They're so good defensively. Mark Adams, the job he's done with Chris Beard heading out and obviously taking over and just sort of reestablishing how good Texas Tech is defensively. I've loved this Texas Tech defense all year long. So that's my biggest concern for Duke. Can they be efficient when Texas Tech makes you take a lot of bad shots? They just make things so ugly for you defensively and make things so difficult for you. It's going to be a challenge for sure. I think the biggest stat that stuck out to me, Texas Tech is averaging 18 points per game for teams in the paint over the course of this tournament, and Duke's right around 40 so far. So can Duke establish themselves in the paint, get to the rim? That's kind of going to be the big question mark. But this is going to be tough. If they can get by Texas Tech, believe it or not, I actually like their chances potentially against Gonzaga in the Elite Eight more if Gonzaga can get by Arkansas than I do Texas Tech in this game. But this is going to be a tough one, and there are probably going to be a lot of mentions from the broadcast crew. Is this his last moment? Because I have a feeling Duke may very well have to come from behind again to win this game in San Francisco.
Yeah, I mean, that's wild to hear you say, that they might fare better against a team like Gonzaga that's so talented. But like you said, I mean, you nailed it early. It's really all about matchups, in the NCAA tournament and who you kind of run into, which is why it's so much fun. Before we let you go, I do want to ask you, you're such a college basketball nut. Which games are you really looking forward to watching over the next couple of days? But, all of them, of course. But I mean, do you have a couple games that are really going to sort of get you excited as a college basketball fan?
Yeah, all of them is right. But basically, Carolyn, when March Madness starts, I locate all my devices. I've got my 2 laptops, my TV. I go out and buy 2 more TVs because I get my iPhone. I'm watching everything I can because it's that addicting. No, I'm looking forward to all of them. I will say in terms of what I think are the most interesting matchups, Arizona, Houston. That's one, if you're watching at home, you want to make sure you get your seatbelt on, you're kind of bracing yourselves. You might feel some pain at home with how much toughness and physicality is going to be in that game. So that's one that's going to be a blast for sure. I think UCLA and UNC is a fascinating matchup. North Carolina, I look at what they did against Baylor. I think going back to really beating Duke and Cameron Indoor in Coach K's final home game, I was watching that game and Duke's up and I'm thinking, oh, he's going to get the fairy tale ending. And here comes UNC, and they just completely spoil the party. And all they've done since is get to the Sweet 16. I think they gave their fans a heart attack in the round of 32 because they're up 25 on Baylor, and then Baylor storms back and forces overtime. And I don't know what happened to UNC, but they've looked really good. I love their backcourt. I think Armando Bacot's an incredible player in the front court for them. And UCLA is hobbled right now. Jaime Jaquez is the guy who makes them go. People remember UCLA's run in the bubble in Indy last year. Jaime Jaquez is kind of that guy, that sort of heart and soul guy for their team. He's got a bad ankle injury. Mick Cronin has said he's day-to-day. So that's one, if you're trying to bet or figure out who's going to win, you better be checking your phone and checking updates up until game time on Friday night because, that's going to be a huge storyline. If Jaime Jaquez cannot play, I probably favor UNC, not by a lot, but just by a little bit in that matchup. If he can play, I like UCLA to win, but those two styles are pretty similar. I think both have incredible offensive players. Obviously, Johnny Juzang has struggled this year for UCLA in the tournament compared to he averaged, I think, 23 in the tournament last year in their Final Four run. So I think that's a fascinating matchup for sure, too. And then obviously, we've talked about Texas Tech and Duke. That's the one you have to have eyes on. It's going to be fascinating to see if it is the end for Coach K or not.
Man, it has been an incredible tournament so far, and there are so many good storylines on tap for the next couple of days. Jack Benjamin, best of luck to you. Thanks for being with us. Enjoy New Orleans and all of the rabid fans that you're going to run into over the next couple of weeks here as we kind of round out March Madness. Thanks for being with me.
I will for sure. It'll be like Mardi Gras Part 2 when the Final Four ends here. So looking forward to it. Thanks for having me on, Carolyn.
You bet.